before moving on to the awards, as you might know, for the ones who've regularly been coming to the Aerospace and Defence Awards, then you know that slowly and surely we've obviously been expanding those horizons which are beyond just the awards in order to give a more meaning towards the sort of dialogue or sort of interaction that we do at events and ceremonies like this. So having said that, I would like to invite our first panelist, Mr. Jayant Patil. He's a member of Executive Committee of Management for L&T and Advisor Defense SmartTech to the CEO and MD. Can you please welcome him with a huge round of applause? Next, can I please invite Mr. Atul Rane, the CEO and MD of BrahMos Aerospace. He's also renowned for his decades of sustained R&D contributions in indigenous design and development of mission-critical onboard computers. I would also like to next invite Mr. William Blair, the Vice President and Chief Executive of Lockheed Martin India. Prior to this, he was the Vice President and Strategic Solutions of Middle East. And of course, he's already been in this position for quite a long time, already well known to the industry. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Manoj Jain, who's the Director R&D for Bharat Electronics Limited. Prior to this role, he was the General Manager and also the Chief Scientist as well. And last but not the least, Mr. Rajesh Gopalkrishnan, the Chief General Manager, Strategist and Business for Cochin Shipyard. So, gentlemen, before we start, a huge round of applause for all our panelists. Mr. Patil, the first question is for you. There is, as you know, as you can see, the theme also, of course, of the panel discussion today is India's self-reliance and future, because there is so much of importance that has already been given, of course, by our Honorable Prime Minister as well, that the idea and the intent is not only to do things which are self-reliance for us, but also to look at the future, which is continuously keep on exporting as well. So keeping those themes in mind, firstly, I would like to, of course, congratulate you on the great order book that you already have and the successful delivery of the Vajra tanks as well. But I wanted to just ask you a little bit more about, one is that with almost about, can you give us an idea of the exact value of the order book that you have won? And also in over a period of that order book, can you give us an overview on what is the sort of investments that you're looking to make out of those into additional manufacturing units, people, technology, and go on?
Thank you, Bhavya. I think when we talk of defense manufacturing in India and on the Atmanirbhar theme, all of us who are long-term in this industry know that the Atmanirbhar really belongs to the DRDO. That's exactly where it started, and those who are obviously teamed up with DRDO long time back, they are the ones who genuinely can do their own complete systems today. For Larsen Toubro, it's a journey of, I would say, precisely 37 years with DRDO, and as a result, we are able to do complete systems of our own. Now, when we talk of systems, system of systems one can do from concept. You don't do it for yourself alone, and you also do it for exports. When it comes to those kind of know-how and knowledge, it becomes extremely important that we are able to deliver a differentiated solution to our own armed forces. I think the biggest difference what one can create within a country is to be able to give a differentiated capabilities to your own armed forces. The second side, which the Prime Minister keeps talking about, is your armed forces believing that I have a good solution, I have a differentiated solution which my enemy doesn't know of. Because what we do here is not something which is available in Jain's or some other kind of documentation which is available to every of the people in the world, including our enemy. And that's essentially where the theme of Atmanirbhar makes a huge amount of difference. Specific to what you talked about, Larsen Toubro, we today typically talk of 11,000-12,000 crores of order book. And beyond that, we essentially are talking of taking this forward, not just doing it within the country for the Indian Armed Forces, but also taking it overseas into the overseas markets. We've seen that the last 2 years, the COVID did have some dampening effect, but it's picking up now, and that shows by the export numbers India, we know, just about 7 years back, we were typically at about 350, 400 crores of exports per year from the Indian producers. Today, we talk of a number which is 13,000 crores. And that's essentially a huge difference. Again, the commitment of the government to buy from private sector is only on the rise. 68% of the current budget is actually allocated to buying from Indian companies, and that means typically about 85, 90,000 crores being acquired from Indian companies. The share of obviously private sector is rising, and that's essentially where whole lot of private sector is putting more and more money into the investment. As far as Larsen & Toubro is concerned, we invested in 7 manufacturing factories, and we put in roughly about 8,000 crores of investment. And that's essentially where, before we pick up 8,000 crores per year of annual revenue, we did put in enormous amount of our assets behind, and we now await far, far, far larger business volumes to be able to sweat what we have put in place.
Talking a little bit about exports, my next question is to Mr. Rane. Of course, BrahMos missile is one of the great achievements, I would say. Of course, and Dr. Pillai is also here. It's really nation's pride. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of what the recent order in terms of Philippines has also happened, and also there's a talk of the development of the hypersonic missile for BrahMos since quite a while. So can you just throw some light on that subject as well?
Thank you. Both are difficult questions because in an open forum it's difficult to talk about numbers and values, as my fellow panelists Patil Saab has said. But yes, the media is out there and they really know what's going on. The Philippines order which we got in February was a landmark. But what I would like to say is that this order, though it may have been for the BrahMos Aerospace and the BrahMos missile system, it is more like an order which India has bagged. And very close and hot on the heels, L&T has picked up an order recently. I have not heard much of talk about it recently, but I hope during this Defexpo we'll get to hear more about it, hopefully from the L&T people themselves. An equivalent order, what we have picked up with the Philippines, they've almost picked up with another country. The Philippines has been in discussion with us for a very long time. They crossed the line of saying we need it. They found their resources and they will be looking for more. It's a tough task exporting. It's not going to be easy. Though we have been doing a few exports as India, but as a huge system and as a large order, it's a real task. I'm getting a lot of help from my fellow partner industries who are actually holding our hands and making sure that we execute this order, one on time and other is without going into the red. I must tell you that an export order sounds nice when it's $375 million, or if you convert it into crores, quite a couple of crores. But we, to put our foot in the door, we have had to cut a lot of frills. And finally, I would say that to start this, we are, not looking at any profits almost. It's sad to make this statement, but the day we start competing in terms of export orders as Lockheed does, then we will start talking about making money for the country. But right now it's making a name for the country, and that's what BrahMos has started off with. It's all due to the participation of our design partners and our industry partners. Our founder, COMD, is here today. He created the mind to market. I guess a few of us who followed him have created mind to the world, and that's what we are looking forward to. As to your second part of the question, hypersonics is a buzzword. It's possible. A lot of countries are working on it. India is working on it. Let me tell you that BrahMos is not an R&D institution. We are a production, or we're a sort of a lead integrator and a production place. Our design partners, which are DRDO and POM from Russia, I very proudly make that statement that we have partners from Russia, and there is nothing wrong in it. Both of them are working hard at hypersonics. The building blocks will be made by them, and we hope to get the building blocks together with us in BrahMos. I do have a few youngsters here in BrahMos who also work on a bit of design and studies. But once these building blocks are ready, then we would get together and put together a missile. The question is when and how much. We would have to wait for the armed forces to say that they're ready for a hypersonic missile. That is number one, because BrahMos has actually broken a barrier where we created an article or a weapon system which actually the forces didn't need or didn't want. But today they say, I need it and I want it and I want more and we want better. And that's how this hypersonics has come about. But we are actually waiting for that flip where they say, yes, we need it. As a technology, the world needs it. As a technology, our country should work in it because that's how we stay at the forefront. And we are moving forward in that area. When will be a question mark, which we'll leave for the time being right now.
So what is a natural level of development that you see then in that case, especially when it comes to that missile moving forward in its natural progression in the journey that is already in?
You see, if you look at the way, actually, it's very interesting. There are only about 4 or 5 countries working in hypersonics. And right now, there's only the news that people are testing them. Now, when you say testing, there's nothing which is definite. I know everyone goes overboard and says, I've tested and it's worked. But how many of them have been inducted into the forces? Almost nothing. There were a few press reports about the recent geopolitical situation which is developed, that the Kinzhal missile, which is supposed to be a hypersonic missile, was used. But I would say maybe they use 1 or 2, not more. That means numbers are still not there in the forces. So I would say that the defense forces would start getting hypersonics maybe in another 2 to 3 years around the world, and we would be very, very close on their limits.
Great. So my next question is to Mr. Blair, while they, of course, fix the mic. Now, as some of our panelists also mentioned, and of course, in the beginning, I was also stating that this is a very important juncture, of course, for India. Naturally, there is a huge push towards self-reliance and future and all of these things. What, as a company, what specifically towards from that perspective, where does Lockheed One come in? But can you give us a little bit more broader overview of where that support comes from as a company, from international company, towards these aspirations for India?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think where I want to start is the foundation that we with Lockheed Martin and Sikorsky have established through 2 joint ventures down in Hyderabad with Tata Aerospace and Defence. That was an initiative that we took out of opportunity, not out of obligation. We saw an opportunity to bring the C-130J, the tail, the empennage of that aircraft here to India, produce it in India. And with that, actually, we were importing the components, and then over time achieved an 87% indigenous content in the tail of the aircraft. And that's over a number of years. But what's really important about that for us was that helped us establish an aerospace and defense ecosystem that fed into that production. And working with many of the companies here in the room, and now we're at a point where we started and qualified fighter wing production at the same facility. And rather than import the components, we actually started out at a much higher indigenous content from the first article. And so we've seen that evolution in terms of capability, both in our own teams, with our partners, and now with well over 300 suppliers. Most of them are MSMEs feeding in as part of that ecosystem. That's the opportunity we see going forward. I think there's a tremendous opportunity with a multi-role fighter aircraft requirement that's coming up to leverage the foundation that's been established and to be able to take that forward. Similarly, we're delivering the MH-60 Romeo today to the Indian Navy. There's been 3 aircraft initially delivered in San Diego for training, and now 3 aircraft have been delivered here in India, with more to come. And I think that's a great example of where we can then take our operations to the next level, not just in terms of delivering the products, but finding partners in India for the maintenance, repair, and overhaul and the sustainment of the platforms, such as the C-130J and the MH-60 Romeo, and actually look ahead to the future where both for self-reliance, but also for reliability of supply, and then yes, for the lowest cost of ownership, or manage the maintenance cost and sustainment cost going forward. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity for us here in India to get beyond just the platform and the components and the systems, but also integrate that to meet the self-reliant goal for India. But I would underscore the importance for exports. I think that's where one of our greatest potential is, and will continue to be, as my colleagues here have already spoken to that opportunity. That's how we get scale. We initially started producing to meet a global requirement as part of our global supply chain, to position for the Indian requirement that was coming up, to make in India, then ultimately for India, and then for the world. I think that's where we see the future. And when I think of self-reliance, it's working with partners here in India, with the likes of L&T and Tata and Mahindra, but then the MSMEs, Russell, Texas, Sasmos, many others, that are part of that whole ecosystem. And I think that's what we really need to remember, is it's that complete ecosystem capability that's going to allow us to both be self-reliant, but also elevate our exports.
Just a follow-up question on this. Of course, it's important, naturally, as you mentioned, that as an ecosystem, there are more and more MSMEs that are coming together. They are working with, of course, a firm like yours. But for a firm like yours, what constitutes the word transfer of technology? If you can just give us a little bit more in-depth understanding from a Lockheed's perspective, because for anyone, for example, when India invests into a C-130J or a Romeo helicopter, naturally there are certain offset obligations which have to be fulfilled. While some of the industry people might obviously have a much deeper understanding, but largely still they might not have a very clear or basic understanding of what that offset obligation is and how much of that technology is really being transferred. Is it only up to the design phase, or is it only the manufacturing side? If you can just throw a little bit of light on that, that would be really great.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a few examples. And actually, all of the transfer of technology was out of an initiative and not out of offset obligations. I can't think of one transfer of technology project that's been approved under offsets. But just an example, over 10 years ago, we transferred technology to Ashok Leyland for the light bulletproof vehicle. And so that was a direct transfer of technology with a licensing and a royalty-based agreement, whereby we could transfer the technology, and then Ashok Leyland could adapt and indigenize that to meet the specific Indian Air Force or other service requirement. That's one. The other is what we did when I mentioned in transitioning the C-130J production of the empennage. There's a transfer of technology and an investment, foreign direct investment that came with that. But there was an advancement of other capabilities. We invested in metal-to-metal bonding. We invested in composites. We invested in special processing capability. And with those investments, they were both, physical, say, financial investments, but also a transfer of technology in terms of know-how and actually design and development locally here in India. So we worked together on many of those projects. And then I think when we think of transfer of technology going forward, we have something we displayed earlier this year, an Onyx exoskeleton, something we developed in our technology center. We got it to a certain TRL level, but we didn't feel like we could take that to market as effectively. But if we transfer that technology to a partner here in India that has a much greater requirement to be able to take at scale, make the business model work, or adapt it into something that they're producing already that would meet the needs of an Indian Army soldier, an infantryman at altitude, that's a case where we could say we just literally develop and transfer the technology to India, and then they have the rights to evolve and adapt and extend that capability.
Understand. Thank you so much. Mr. Gopalkrishnan, my next question is to you. Firstly, of course, congratulations. Huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our first ever, for our carrier INS Vikrant. Um, Two questions, Mr. Krishnan. One is, of course, if you can just give us a quick journey of how how the development of the carrier came about. And number two is also that almost about over 70% of the 70% of the carrier that is being, of course, developed, it's indigenous. So can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of what the remaining about 24 odd percent is, and also is it really possible for us to indigenize those aspects of the aircraft as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you first of all for the appreciation. Before I go into to answer your question directly, I think most of us here, I'm sure, are related to the defense field. So I just give a brief on the vessel as well, so that it will be interesting. And then you understand when we talk about Atmanirbhar. So without a doubt, I think this was probably one of the most largest and complex platforms that we have built thus far. Just to give a feel, it's all of 21,000 tons of steel. It's got around 2,400 kilometers of cabling in it. It's got around 140 kilometers of piping. It's got around 11 kilometers of AC ducting. It's say what 22 megawatt into 4 GTs of LM2 2500 from GE. It's got 8 into 3 megawatts, 24 megawatts of power being generated, 2,400 compartments, out of it around 1,900, close to 1,900 odd are habitability compartments, which means all these compartments would need electrification, electricity, furnishing, AC, and all those things. All 1,600 and odd crew and officers staying on board. So all in all, this is broadly what the whole thing was about. I've not got into the the aviation part, that's much more complex. But so when we talk about having achieved 70 odd percentage of indigenous content, I think it speaks volumes for India as a country, because on a first of its kind project of this nature, going to that level of indigenization was really a great achievement. And when I say that, it's got nothing really to do about CSL. We've been actually lucky. We've been happy to sort of play a lead and focal point role in coordinating the whole thing. But actually, when we look at the aircraft carrier, India has moved. Actually, the country has moved as a team. And I can, if I were to just mention quickly, if you take the public sectors, all the major public sectors, you take HAL, you take BEL, you take BHEL, SAIL, because for the first time in India, we developed and Midani developed and rolled DMR 249 and 249A steel in the country, and now today we're using it across all defense platforms. So all the major public sectors. Now coming to the private, of course, lead players like L&T, Tata Defense, Kirloskar Pneumatics, Johnson Controls, and again moving forward, there was tremendous involvement from the DRDO labs, be it NMRL, be it DRDL or NSTL. So if you look at it as a whole, when at the end of the day, when we talk about 76% indigenous content and all, it's actually a country that has stood up and delivered. And on the service side, yes, around 500 and odd indigenous vendors were developed, out of which more than 100 were MSMEs. So again, now coming to the second part of your question, what is left? Actually, if you look at it, it is more like steel came from India, cables came from India, habitability was all Indian. What really remains is the aviation flight complex. Now, as you all are probably aware, an aircraft carrier gets designed or around the type of aircraft it's going to operate. And when we started off designing this, when I say we, it was the Indian Navy who did the basic design, and I need to make special mention about the unconditional and support and handholding that CSL as a yard has received from the Indian Navy right throughout the project. So when the Indian Navy conceived and did the basic design, this was designed around the operation of MiG aircraft, as we all know. And so the aviation fight complex as a whole has come from the Russians. So if you look at the remaining part of the 76%, it's more or less the majority chunk of it comes from the aviation AFC complex, as we call it. So there could be a little more gap there, which I'm sure we'll be able to address as we go forward. So I think what this project, just to conclude, what this project probably has done to us, not only as a yard but as a country, is that if you when you look back, because I've been sort of seeing this for the last decade or so. When you look back and if you look at it, if you just stay away from the technical part and look at it a little philosophically, what we could probably conclude is that it's not always that we lack the capability, and more often than not it's a slightly lack of self belief that doesn't really allow us to achieve certain things. And this project, I think, is a prime example. And I think successful completion and the proof of the pudding was 28 knots she achieved in the very first sea trial. So I think this project will give a lot of confidence to us as a country in overcoming these fears. Thank you.
Absolutely. And once again, congratulations. It genuinely is a monumental feat and, of course, a big, proud moment for Indians everywhere. Mr. Jain, I'd like to, of course, ask you the final question before we move on to opening the floor for the audience. What is the level of impetus that companies and PSUs, of course, like yours, that put into R&D? Because I know that's where your technical domain and, of course, your expertise is also. I know that obviously you would work very closely with DRDO and a lot of the other agencies as well. One is, what is the impetus? And number two is, how important is that not just fulfilling the requirements of the current armed forces or everything that you already provide, but looking at that and beyond?
R&D is very, very important for the survival, especially in this defense electronics domain, where technology changes so fast. So until you are having a strong R&D, you can't survive long in defense electronics, a company like Bell. We are working very, very closely, as you have told, with the DRDO. We are the largest development and production partner for DRDO, and around 40% of our turnover comes from that association. But around 40% of our turnover comes from our in-house efforts. We have 3-tier R&D structure, and that is very unique. Bell is structured itself for future that way from R&D point of view. We have CRLs, Central Research Laboratory, who look at blue sky research, looking beyond 5 and 10 years. Then we have PDIC, who looks at present common products and modules. And then we have D&Ds, who looks at production support, obsolescence management, trials, evaluations, etc. So around 40% of our turnover comes from that. But around 20% of our turnover comes from foreign TOTs. That foreign TOT is not just buy and sell or a FF form. It is in-depth manufacturing form where we learn a lot during that process, absorb the new technology, and then see that we can support it for next 15-20 years, do value addition as well as do obsolescence management and other things. And it comes with improvement in our quality process, our manufacturing process, etc. also. So all the three fronts, we get lot of learning, lot of input, lot of knowledge, and that only makes us to survive for future. So we are aiming now for around 20% growth, and that is possible by all these three. And of course, with Indian MSME and academia, we have a special portfolio. Especially our CRLs are meant for interaction more with academia, and our PDIC is meant for working more with MSMEs in a collaborative R&D mode. So we have well thought out plans for tapping academia potential as well as MSME and startup potential. So that way, I feel we are geared up for taking Bell and India to next level of R&D.
Thank you so much for that. I think Mr. Reddy would like to open the first question.
My question is to Mr. William from Lockheed Martin. I appreciate your efforts in developing things and making a lot of manufacturing happen in the country here. A lot of things getting exported from here. Definitely, we appreciate that. But looking at the current scenario, the way India is emerging as another technological hub, developing many technologies in-house, a lot of capabilities in the even in most advanced technologies coming up. Why don't you think of a model where take up something completely most advanced thing, a new system, and why don't we jointly develop with this country, with an industry here, like the way what has been done the time with the BrahMos, sort of a thing. Why don't you think about instead of just you develop and transfer the technology here, uh, the new model.
That's a great point. You know, I think we all had higher hopes for the Defense Trade and Technology Initiative as that vehicle through which we could do both co-development and co-production as a more viable solution. And the idea was, and I was here at the time in a different role, was to accelerate and elevate the relationship between U.S. and India from a licensing and collaboration perspective. And I think, you know, we all would have liked to see that get us further. But I think those opportunities are still there. I mean, I think what we're proposing with partners for a fighter requirement, a helicopter requirement, or even back to what we had proposed back in 2011, 2012 in terms of ATGM, time Javelin, co-development, co-production of a longer range and more capable anti-tank guided missile to complement what was already in the inventory or in development in India as well. And so I think, well, I know our interest and our passion is still there to find those opportunities to work together. But I really believe that in the spirit of collaboration, it's truly a win-win. I think that when you look at how we develop a platform, it's really integrating capabilities from around the world from like-minded partners, right? And so when we look at self-reliant India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think there's an opportunity and a role for OEMs like Lockheed Martin to establish a local entity, work with local partners, and really tap into the full aerospace and defense ecosystem that we've been a part of over the last 2 decades. That's how I see going forward, both for the fighter, the helicopter requirements, and I think we've got good examples where we've worked together with both defense public sector units as well as with the private sector. But I agree with you, we'd like to be able to move faster on that journey for self-reliance. And then lastly, translate to exports, meet India's requirements, but do that with a longer-term vision towards how that meets a greater requirement in either the region or a global need.
If there are any other questions, we have time for about one odd question. If anybody would like to ask any question, please just raise their hands and we'll have the mic sent across to you. Okay, I see one question coming up over there. I see. We'll come back to you as well. Just 1 second. So we'll just take those 2 questions. After that, we'll just call it, please.
I'm here. Good afternoon. This is a very general question. It's great to know that massive investments are coming into India, like companies are investing, exports are happening, all that's fine. But to catch up with the intent of becoming self-reliant, do we have the skill force? Do we have the talent? What's happening on that front? I would like to know from all of you. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Patil, would you please?
The skill force, the talent, I have no doubt we have it. It's essentially how to channelize. We need to create policies are there. We need to, maybe tweak the policies a little bit to make sure that the skill force and the talent is channelized into what we actually need. Right now, I have a feeling that we're actually getting pulled apart. Each one is looking for, for example, the welders. Let's just take a simple question of the welders. Each one of us needs welders, but each one of us looks at a different place for them. If you could, channelize them into one sort of a way that this is a method to get to your skill force and look forward to what are the numbers, I think we would be able to go further. The main thing is the policies need to be tweaked. That's what I would feel. But maybe the industry or the PSUs would be able to give a better take on it.
I fully support what was just said. See, India actually doesn't really lack any skill. Yes, there's a bit of training and development or fine tuning that would be required. Why I'm telling this so confidently is that just we were just talking about the aircraft carrier, and when it moved into the outfitting and the commissioning phases, and when the project was peaking, every given day we had 7,000 footfalls in that single project. So to ramp up from and the yard per se, a permanent workforce is 1,800. So you just imagine how we had to ramp up, and we really didn't face any difficulty. Yes, there's a bit of planning required. There's a bit of training and skill development. You'll have to see a little into the future, and there's a huge pool. Today, I think one challenge that all of us would probably have is how do we sustain this skill that we have developed, the expertise that we've developed, the resources that we've developed. So continuous, Sir was telling, can it be a pool where all of us actually tap? So how do we formalize that sort of an arrangement? Those are things probably that we will have to, discuss or put in place through some sort of a policy. Yes, today that we have a Skill India mission. There are courses that are on offer, formalized structures that are in place. A lot of things are happening, but on the ground, has it actually become is it really practically working? Those are things that we'll have to see. But from a resource point of view, I don't think we need to worry too much, or from a skill point of view.
I have a slight different view on the subject, and the reason I say so is we obviously have no dearth of talent, we have no dearth of innovation. Ability to innovate is among the best in India. What we don't have, and that's essentially where we need to be paying a lot of attention, is the productivity of Indian average worker. I don't mean the knowledge workers here. The average workman on the shop floor, just ask Bill, and he would tell you a particular job, a man in Europe or in US does it in X number of hours, man hours as we talk of. The same work in India does take much longer. And that's essentially is an aspect which we need to be focusing far more through the skilling interventions. So skilling intervention is extremely important. Obviously, a whole lot of us can do a lot about it. I would say in different domains, Lasan Tubro today trains about 1.5 lakh workmen. And that's something which we do as a part of our contribution to the industry beyond what we would have utilized. Obviously, the first job we provide to all those people. But beyond the first job, there's no necessity that he has to work. Specific to defense, we actually have made our intake 2.5 times larger just because of one scheme of Government of India. It does not ask me to confirm each trainee if I take him, which used to be the archaic kind of laws which will force me to. So 60% of the manpower force, I release to the industry after the skilling. And that's essentially where you're bringing up an overall ecosystem, and the one you're releasing is far superior to when you actually acquired that, call it a person, call it a boy. Now, this is an intervention which whole lot of us need to spend far more attention to be able to take us to the global productivity level. And that certainly is what we need to be focusing more and more going forward.
Can we just have one more last question? That's it. Can we please have the mic to the lady? Sorry, sir, we're just going to take one more question. That's about it.
Sir, I would like to ask a question, Mr. Jain. This is regarding, as we all aware, that the Indian Armed Forces are having quite a few artilleries that are nearing their life extension, or some of them are already expired. So is BL also the R&D sector, is it also working towards rocket refurbishment or indigenously developing them or something towards that?
Incidentally, among the Indian Army, the most modern arm is the artillery. I don't agree with your observation that artillery is something where we are far behind. We have enough rocket artillery. The fundamental designs which stem out of the DRDO stable, which is under production, and what was designed has actually seen a Mark III. And why I call it Mark III is there's original one which was the Pinakas. The Pinaka underwent substantial amount of improvement in terms of what is getting now not just being made for the country but also being exported. In terms of guns, if we really look at what has happened over the last about, I would say, just about 10 years. Before that, yes, artillery did try to buy whole lot of different kind of gun systems. We're not successful because our requirements are the toughest in the world. Having gone through multiple programs in terms of qualification, we know Indian Army's requirement in artillery is among the toughest. But this is essentially an armed force which creates a differential. At standoff distances, you can hold an enemy, and that's essentially where the artillery is. But the fact remains, artillery among the armed forces is the most modern as of today, if we speak.
Great. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Please, a huge round of applause for all the panelists. I'm sorry, I know there are more questions coming in, but in the interest of time, we have to just cut this panel discussion short. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being part of the panel. Again, once again, ladies and gentlemen, huge round of applause. Please, sir.